Hey guys, I was originally just going to make a guide on Iceman's utility skill, but in the process, I ended up collecting more and more data before I knew it. I had enough together to actually do a guide. So here is the information that I have on Iceman, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you find it informational. So first of all, let's just cover his traits. He has the ice slide trait that allows him to jump, then press jump again, hang at that altitude, and then slowly descend back to the ground shortly after. I wish he was able to maintain that altitude, but unfortunately he does sink back down after a few seconds. Still a pretty cool trait. It's better than just your regular jump. His other two traits are fire resistance and ice resistance. I'm not sure of a real practical use for the ice resistance at this point, but the fire resistance is handy in the X-Men DLC as it allows you to pick up the Phoenix buff without taking the damage penalty from that buff. So let's take a quick look at his basic attacks. His light attack, he forms his hand into a sort of ice sword, slashes forward, and then finishes off that sequence with ice spikes that shoot up in the ground in a straight line in front of him. That is, it's a pretty nice attack. I like it. It has the ice damage tag and the pierce damage tag. So it would scale from ice damage, pierce damage, or from strength. His second basic attack is his heavy attack. I really like this attack. It has a nice long range. It has a nice wide path that it travels and hits things, in a good spacing side to side. And on top of that, it pierces, so it hits everything in that line that it travels on. This attack has an ice damage tag and an energy damage tag. So you can scale it up using either ice damage, energy damage, or mastery. His last basic attack is his air attack. This attack, you jump into the air, you're going to throw several ice spikes down. I think it's around 4. And you have time to get off about 3 volleys of this before he actually returns to the ground. This air attack has the ice damage tag and a melee damage tag, which kind of surprised me since it seemed more like a projectile, but hey, whatever floats your boat. Uh, so anyway, this one scales with either ice damage, melee damage, or strength. So the common denominator between his basic attacks is the ice damage tag, which will be important when we're considering his overall build later on. Okay, let's look at Iceman's damage skills. I want to save his utility skill for last, so at this time I'm going to be talking about his 3 damage skills. I'm going to start with Arctic Blast. This is the ice beam that he fires. It's very similar to Doctor Strange's Flames of the Faltine, except in ice form. The one difference is that if you hold the cast button with this skill, you can continue until you run out of EP, and you are able to aim this left to right during the casting of this skill. The skill does penetrate, and you are able to charge your allies with the ice element if they can receive that once you level this skill up to that point. So, all in all, pretty nice little skill. It has the energy tag and the ice tag. So those ISOs will work to augment this as well as a mastery would augment this. And then the synergy tag on this skill is the freeze synergy. So great for getting those catalyst synergies. All in all, pretty nice skill. His second damage skill is Shimmering Shards. This is my favorite because of the way it works and the tags that are on it. My favorite skill in his kit. This skill, he takes his fist, slams it into the ground. You get a big mound of ice spikes that shoot up from the ground afterward and provide the damage there. So the tags on this skill are ice tag, melee tag, so you could augment this particular skill with either ice ISO, melee ISO, or strength ISO. And then the synergy tag on this skill is bash. Bash is one of my favorite synergy tags. You can just get so many powerful synergies with bash, getting shockwave, catalyst, and surge. Just nice bursty damage. And right now is what I'm going to point out that thus far, all his basics and every skill we have looked at have had the ice tag, and that is how I would suggest building Iceman. But let's look at his last skill, Ice Impact. While it is rated with the highest damage number, Ice Impact is going to be limited by some factors. So this skill is the one where he drops the big boulder of ice from the sky. You can target it with R, um, but if you use ZR to force the targeting or force the synergy, it's going to force a kind of mid-range target on you, which is a little bit awkward. It doesn't do the directly in front of you thing that other skills of this nature generally do when you force a synergy. The other thing I'll point out is that the range is pretty decent on this skill, but it's not as great as some of the other targetable skills, which keeps me from liking it quite as much. But the thing that really is the nail in the coffin on this skill for me is that it only has a melee tag. So this is only going to receive benefit from melee or strength ISO. Don't know why there's not an ice tag on this skill. Everything else in his kit has ice tag. It just kind of disappoints me to see that skill there with no ice tag. And then the synergy on this is Slam. While Slam is a perfectly good synergy tag, it is not as versatile as either Freeze or Bash. So I think that kind of limits the usefulness of this skill in his kit, unfortunately. But it will have its niche uses in story mode and things, but I don't really see it coming out ahead of the other attacks he has unless you are simply wanting to attack from a distance. That's the only time I see this attack really coming in handy. Alright, so just to quickly talk about the ISO that I would suggest for Iceman, since we've looked at his skills and looked at all his tags. The Ice ISO is where I would concentrate myself, since that affects the vast majority of his kit. And then percent damage to enemies is always welcome, but you're just not going to get the amount of damage out of percent damage to enemies that you'll get out of concentrating on ice, because the ice gives you something like nearly 25% when it's fully leveled up damage. The percent damage to enemies is like 16, so you don't have to be a math whiz to see that there's a pretty big gap there. The other ISO I would say is worth mentioning is the takes less hits to inflict a status on enemies, and then the ability attribute ISO as well. So those are the ISO that I would suggest considering for Iceman. Okay, that brings us to the thing that drew me to investigate Iceman in the first place, and that is his Fast Freeze utility skill. Now, the first thing that I will point out about this is while this has, I believe it's an energy and ice tag, I honestly didn't even make notes on it, and the reason being is I don't know why there's tags on this skill. It seems to make absolutely no difference whatsoever in its power, duration, anything else. I really don't know why they are there. So just as far as I can tell, you can ignore these tags. So what this skill does, it allows in an AoE Iceman to apply the ice uh, element trait to the people who can receive it on his comp, which is really nice. But it also applies in fast freeze armor to the allies that are in that AoE as well. And so my curiosity was, what exactly is the value of this ice armor? What's the duration? And so all the testing I did was with Iceman at max level and his skill at the full 5 levels that it can receive. So that little disclaimer there, this is with this skill fully enhanced. I did some investigating in the regular game and gauntlets. The armor did seem to fluctuate slightly on values, but it stayed fairly consistent within about 5%. So what I want to do is look at some of these in-game clips and see what I found there. Alright, what we're seeing in this clip here is first Cable at the damage resistance cap of what I have found to be around 73%. And then next I have reduced his ISO loadout to only 41.8% damage resist and applied the fast freeze armor. And I'm going to find that that damage is still falling in the same window. Alright, so next I'm going to have Iceman with absolutely nothing. That's just the full damage he takes there. And now I'm going to have Iceman with his fast freeze armor applied. So in that first clip I saw that Cable took the same damage with 73% damage resist ISO as he did with 41.8% damage resist ISO and fast freeze armor. So that gives me a good idea of how powerful this armor is. So to try to dial in on exactly what was going on and to also verify that it worked the same on Iceman and his allies, which it does appear to, is I tried Iceman first with nothing at all. I was receiving 807 to 840 damage from that attack, and then with Iceman and his fast freeze armor applied, that damage dropped to 520 to 537 damage. The best I can tell, that looks like about a 35% damage resist in this case. I did try this also in some gauntlets and against different attacks. The damage resist did seem to vary slightly, but it stayed around that 30 to 35% damage window or damage resist window. So what I'm getting at is this is an extremely powerful utility skill, quite overpowered in my mind. This is allowing you to apply a 30 to 35% damage resist to your entire team. The duration on this skill when it is fully leveled is 45 seconds. So we're not talking about something that you're constantly having to switch back and reapply. This lasts long enough to get you through most boss fights. You can switch back to Iceman, reapply for the next boss round. It is quite powerful. So just to kind of put this in perspective, I've pretty much determined for me, I'm comfortable running anything short of a leaderboard push with 30% damage resistance. So in other words, I feel comfortable running anything in the game with Iceman in my comp with no defensive ISO whatsoever. Gear everyone out fully offensive, then use this skill for armor. You're in great shape, at least in my opinion. So the equivalent would be, you know, if you don't have Iceman in your comp, if you want to take equivalent damage, you're going to have to put at least 2 of the 15% damage resist ISO on every single member of your team to have that equivalent damage resistance. So like I said, that skill is extremely powerful. Now it does not allow you to move beyond the damage resist cap, if anybody's wondering about that. If you put the 75% on somebody or 73 where you're at cap and then you use fast freeze on top of that, you receive no benefit from fast freeze. So it is subject to the damage resistance cap. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informational and useful, and I will talk to you next time.